Coming up on today's show.
As our season is getting kicked off here, it surprises me every year how many guys are super interested in their faith, who are searching for something bigger, who have deep questions of the heart and are searching for truth.
Peace be with you. This is Catholic Sports Radio, located at the intersection of your faith life and sports life, and on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and lots of other platforms. I am Bruce Wozniak, talking with Catholic guests who are current or former athletes, coaches, referees, umpires, clergy, administrators, and more from the pro, amateur, and scholastic ranks about the intersection of their faith life and their sports life. The show website is catholicsportsradio.net. Be sure that you have signed up there for free for the Catholic Sports Radio e-newsletter that gets sent out each Monday. That's it, just once a week. While you are there on the website doing that, look at the top of any page on the site, and you will see social media links, logos for this show, meaning Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube, so that you can engage with me and the show that way. The Catholic Sports Radio community is the Facebook group consisting of listeners of this show and some past guests. That is free to join, and you can also find a link for that too on catholicsportsradio.net. In fact, Anna Chippa, the guest from 4 weeks ago on episode 272, she is now a member of that Facebook group as well. I love hearing from listeners, and so social media as well as the website all give you the opportunity to contact me, as does traditional email, which you can do through bruce@catholicsportsradio.net. Now on to my ministry moment for this episode. There's a lot of waiting, wondering, and hoping going on at this time of year. College graduations are happening, and so those students are anxious to see the next phase of their life begin. Similarly, the NFL draft took place last month, meaning that 257 student-athletes are ready to take the next step in their football career. The WNBA recently held their draft as well, giving pro basketball opportunities now to 36 young ladies leaving college for the professional ranks. They all are eager to see what this next level of sports will hold for them, and they do so with dreams and optimism, and understandably, doing so with stars in their eyes. We can all relate, whether we're involved in sports in some capacity or not. Maybe there's a new job on the horizon for us, or a dream vacation we're saving up for, or a new car. There are lots of everyday situations, so to speak, where we think we're going to discover newfound joy. But what we can't even begin to quantify is what the Lord has waiting for us because of His majesty. In the New Testament, we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9, quote, "But as it is written, what eye has not seen and ear has not heard, and what has not entered the human heart, what God has prepared for those who love Him." Moving on now with this week's episode, my guest is an outfielder with the Schaumburg Boomers of the Frontier League, which is a professional partner league of Major League Baseball. Last year, in 78 games played, he batted .300 and had a .995 fielding percentage. After playing collegiately at the University of Minnesota-Duluth, he went on to play Double-A ball with the Chicago Dogs of the American Association. He had started his college career at the University of North Carolina at Asheville. He also trains youth baseball players at a local facility. On the faith side, he has a conversion story that he will share with us today. Welcome to Catholic Sports Radio, Brett Milazzo.
Thanks for having me, Bruce. I'm grateful for all the work that you guys have been doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Been looking forward to this. As we heard in the intro, and as is the case when you're a professional baseball player, you have moved around a lot. But where did it all start for you? Meaning, where were you born and raised, and what was the family size?
I was born in Lake Villa, Illinois, which is just a small city in northwest Illinois. And I got a mom, a dad, and an older sister. And now I have a nice 1-year-old niece. And so, yeah, small family, and that's about it.
Where is that in relation to Chicago, I guess, would be the city we would all wonder if it's near to?
Okay, yeah, it's close to Chicago, about 45 minutes to, I guess in traffic, it could be like 2 hours away from the city, but depends.
Okay. And was this a Catholic household you were raised in? And also, to what extent did you receive Catholic education?
So growing up, we were a Catholic family. My mom is Catholic, dad's Catholic. I received all the sacraments as part of my formation, but growing up, it wasn't like a huge part of our family, I guess, but definitely got all the main stuff taken care of. And then I did go to Catholic high school at Carmel Catholic in Mundelein, which is right across from the Mundelein Seminary.
Okay, an audience, if you're scratching your head a little bit, so am I. And so let's be patient because we're going to unpack Brett's story as we go along. I know that sounds a little mixed messages, like maybe we're supposed to read between the lines there. Were they Catholic or not? It sounds like maybe they were, and he did go to Catholic high school, but he's also not gushing about being devout and extremely involved with the parish and that kind of thing. So let's just continue along here and we'll see where this goes to. I have become a big advocate of not assuming. So even though, Brett, I read off lots and lots of baseball in the intro, when and how did you first start into playing sports? And was it only baseball or did you compete in anything else?
Good question. So I began pretty much with baseball. That was my huge passion growing up. Started in t-ball and started taking it more seriously as I got into middle school and high school. But the other sport that I got really into was gymnastics. And I was always kind of a little bit shorter and always had some like level of body awareness. I wasn't very flexible, but regardless, it just worked out pretty well that gymnastics was a good sport. But as I got older, that time commitment between baseball and gymnastics became too much. So I ended up just playing baseball, and that's kind of been the trend for the past close to 20 years now.
Now, both baseball and gymnastics, did you find those two sports on your own, or did your dad, I don't want to say push you, encourage you? Did he have an influence? How did you choose those two sports?
Yeah, I definitely had the best coach ever in my dad growing up. He was a part of all of my teams up until high school. So he was my coach. He was always by my side. I never had an instructor like how I do with kids now. I always had my dad. And so I wouldn't say that he ever pressured me in any way to continue playing, but if I said that I wanted to play, he was going to support me in that, and he would challenge me if I ever like kind of wavered in that. So he made me stick to my commitments when it came to baseball, especially, and gymnastics was something that was more, it wasn't really his thing as much. It was more something that I just really enjoyed, but he definitely made me know that if I was gonna like stick with it, I had to honor the time commitment that it was asking too. And when that became too much, it was something that had to kind of go away. It was like an either or situation. So yeah, I'm super grateful for my dad as a coach and how he's always kind of just supported me in what I chose to do, but then held me accountable for the things that I have, like that I said that I would do.
An audience, that sounds like such a routine conversation, a routine statement, but I can't underscore the importance of that enough. And Brett said two key words. He talked about accountability and he talked about support, how supportive his father was. And so I can't state enough on this show how influential parents are on their kids, whether you think you're being influential or not. If Brett's father had just kind of waved his hand and said, yeah, go ahead, son, whatever, and he's just at best paying half attention to Brett, who knows what kind of influence that would have had on young Brett Milazzo. So this really did a lot for him, as we're hearing. But I want to move forward now, Brett. Talk to us about your college years. In the intro, I said you played at the University of North Carolina at Asheville and at the University of Minnesota-Duluth, although I think there might have actually been one more school. If you're comfortable talking about it, tell us what was going on over those years and maybe any lessons you took away from it, meaning the fact that you're at 2 and possibly 3 schools.
Yeah, so I'm happy to share. I started taking baseball a lot more seriously in high school, and with a couple really good opportunities, I was able to wind up receiving the chance to play at Purdue University out of high school. So that's where I went right after high school was Purdue.
Wow.
And then I was a little bit shell-shocked when I arrived because it was a lot more competitive than high school, and the team environment was not a good fit in a lot of ways for where I was at. And I transferred out at the semester. So I wasn't there very long, so I can't take a lot of pride in being a Boilermaker or anything like that. But I enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I experienced it because it gave me a lot more perspective on things. And then at semester, I was able to transfer out to, the University of North Carolina at Asheville. And that was a school that I had been in close contact with during my recruiting process. And I have some family that lives out there in North Carolina. So it felt like a good fit and a good transition, and a little bit smaller school, a little bit more manageable and comparable to what I had in high school. And so I went out there, and I was there for a year and a half. We experienced some coaching changes and injuries and all sorts of things that led to me not really having a place on the team after a year and a half there. So I was kind of pressed into having to transfer out. And I was pretty much going into my sophomore year at that point, or my redshirt sophomore year, really without a home, not really knowing where I was going to go, kind of at a low place with baseball, not knowing what the future had in store. And luckily I was playing summer baseball with a teammate who played at the University of Minnesota-Duluth, where I ended up going. And he overheard a conversation that I was having with the coach about kind of feeling like I was without a paddle. And he said, if you want, I can just text the coach and see if we can set something up. We just lost our center fielder last year and we need one. And so that worked out to be the best case scenario. And within a couple months, I was on campus there.
Wow. And audience, don't miss all the geographic points that Brett touched on, right? Because Purdue, correct me if I'm wrong, is in Indiana. And then he talked about Asheville, which is, of course, North Carolina, and now all of a sudden into Minnesota. So for a young student, I'm going to say boy or girl, who is, let's say, 20 years old, for example, to all of a sudden go from home in the greater Chicago area to Indiana and then to North Carolina and then to Minnesota, there's a lot going on. And so that goes right back to parents, how present you need to be for your child. I know you want them to go off and you want them to learn to stand on their own 2 feet now and become a young adult. But Brett, I'm sure you would agree that that does become something that you just can't deal with all that by yourself.
No. And I'm lucky that I'm blessed, I should say, that I had that support from them. And I would say that I don't know if anybody could be really prepared for all of that transition and all of that newness. But yeah, for what it's worth, I did have a good support group inside of that. And so super grateful for that. And they were always by my side.
Nice.
Supporting me in those transitions, yeah.
So let's start getting into your conversion story, although I want to break this up into 2 parts. First, start us into it with what occurred with a teammate of yours at the University of Minnesota-Duluth.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that I really didn't have much of a faith background, despite having been to Catholic high school, and I received all the necessary sacraments through confirmation, but really didn't have faith as a central part of my life. And it really wasn't a part of the conversation in my household growing up. It was there, but sort of floating on the periphery. So when I came to Minnesota-Duluth, I kind of was just living a very worldly life and chasing after a lot of worldly pursuits. And baseball especially had taken me, like you said, kind of across the country and up and down and all around. And I wasn't very familiar with like what it meant to trust in God's plan for me. And I very quickly, within a few weeks of being on campus, there was a guy who is Catholic and heavily involved with different ministries on campus and wanted to go deeper with our team. His name was Robbie Mouton, and he had started a Bible study, and he must have seen like a cross that I wear on my neck and was like, all right, he's Christian, and just asked me if I wanted to come to the Bible study, said that we could use some like more leaders or just like people who could be involved. And I said yes. It was an opportunity to like, I don't know, get more involved with the team and try to acclimate a little bit from being the guy who transferred in and not really knowing anybody. Yeah, so he got me in there, and I really enjoyed the deeper conversations that were happening. I didn't really follow all of what was going on from a faith perspective, and I really didn't know how to open up a Bible and, you know, turn to whatever book we were studying. But it was good to just have like some depth of conversation with these guys, and it felt like a real like team experience. And so through that, I was there for the whole fall semester. We would meet weekly, and Robbie would lead, and we'd all kind of just like chip into the conversation. And that was the extent of my faith life. And then shortly after, at the semester, we were a little bit over our roster size, and we found out that he was actually cut from the team. And so Robbie wasn't going to be around to lead the Bible study. And he was obviously like, he held his own pretty well about it in terms of like keeping positive and kind of just like witnessed to perseverance in a lot of ways and wasn't brought down by it. But he came up to me without saying much and just said, hey, like, I need you to lead this Bible study or keep it going. And I probably laughed. I don't remember, but I felt like that was something that I wasn't really qualified to do by any means, considering I didn't know how to open up the Bible or where to begin or anything really related to faith or spirituality or leading prayer. It just wasn't part of my vocabulary, my lifestyle. And I certainly wasn't leading that kind of Bible study leader lifestyle outside of that space. But I said yes, and I just started kind of copying whatever he did and tried to see where that would go. And that went on for about 2 years worth.
Wow.
Yeah. So for the next 2 years, I was leading a Bible study without really knowing how to lead a Bible study. And I was very grateful that a lot of really good people kind of entered my life through that study. And I was able to get in touch with some of the missionaries on campus and good people who would eventually help me to go deeper in my faith, not just to expand the Bible study, but also to just have an actual conversion to Christ.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And that's a great example of God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called, right? Because Brett said, you know, I was not the prime candidate for it, but that's what happened there. And to embrace it, to do it for 2 years, and then to start saying, okay, you know, who else can I get that's going to really help me is fantastic. And folks, when you hear the continuation of Brett's conversion story, because there is more to it, you're going to hear him mention someone in the Catholic community who, for all intents and purposes, has become a household name, and in fact, whose podcast I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I think. But first, there is an exciting development going on behind the scenes that I hope to be able to officially report on maybe as soon as next week. It involves something to do with Catholic Sports Radio's online presence. I'm waiting for it to be taken care of by the person who does all the back-end stuff that I cannot handle regarding the website. I can't remember if I've reported this to you before or not, but I get invoiced by her every month for the work she does with CatholicSportsRadio.net. and that is to the tune of $90 each month. To me, that's a lot, because then you start factoring in some of the other costs associated with running this ministry, and it really starts to add up quickly. It's also to do, of course, with the fact that I don't get any income from doing this show, nor do I have any sponsors. Those conditions mean that I have to try to find a way out of my own pocket to cover all the bills that come in for Catholic Sports Radio, which I honestly have admitted is challenging for me financially. If this show is helping you in your faith life, if you enjoy Catholic Sports Radio, if you see value in the work that I do to keep this ministry going every week for more than 5 years now, and you believe in the mix of faith and sports and would like to support these ongoing efforts, I ask you to prayerfully consider Catholic Sports Radio as part of your tithing. In fact, it's quite simple to do. There is a blue Donate to CSR button on the homepage of CatholicSportsRadio.net. As some listeners and guests who have done it would attest, it is fast, it is easy, and it's secure. And the element I really like about it is there's no list of amounts to have to choose from. You can simply type in whatever amount you're comfortable giving. And by the way, this will allow you to use a credit card, debit card, or even PayPal. Alternatively, as some folks have opted to do, you can get in touch with me about sending a check through the mail. Contact me through the website or through social media, or just email me via bruce@CatholicSportsRadio.net, and I will email you back with the details on sending something that way. Regardless of which method you use, the blue Donate to CSR button on CatholicSportsRadio.net or sending me a check, with your permission, I will happily say your name on the air as a public thanks, or as some have instructed me to do, you can ask to remain anonymous. I'm grateful for your considering Catholic Sports Radio as part of your tithing, as I continue working to move more people closer to Christ through the mix of faith and sports. Brett, before all that, you were telling us about the Bible study you had gotten into at the University of Minnesota-Duluth. Go ahead and continue the story, including the power of one of the sacraments that you started taking part in and a subsequent activity that you took part in.
Yeah, I was leading that Bible study for 2 years, and during that time, several of the people in the Bible study had kind of been holding me a little bit more accountable to going to church more often. And we had at UMD a really strong Newman Center presence, and a lot of really good people, missionaries and beyond, that if you went to Mass, it was likely that you're going to end up talking to some more people. It was not really a get in, get out sort of situation. And I remember early on, even from when I first showed up on campus, that Robbie invited me to Mass, and I hadn't been to Mass in a long time, but we went, and I was pretty astounded by the pastor of the Newman Center, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. It's just Father Mike Schmitz. And at the time, I didn't know anything about him, and I was just pretty blown away by his speaking and how much he seemed to love what he was doing. At the time, and still to this day, Sunday Mass is held sort of like in an upstairs hall, sort of like by the food courts at UMD. It's not in some beautiful cathedral or anything like that. It's really an effort that they put on to make it as beautiful as possible given the space that they have. And I remember being pretty astounded by it all. But I think those were kind of seeds that were planted. And it wasn't until about 2 years later that, after going to Mass one day, being held accountable by some other guys in the Bible study, that I started to get to know Father Mike a little bit more and started to meet some of the other missionaries as well, who just on and off would just kind of like ask how I was doing, check in with me, see if I wanted to come to more events, see if I wanted to come to Mass more. And sometimes I would see them off campus. I remember grabbing dinner one time with Father Mike and just being astounded that this guy's really who he is who he is, kind of thing. And he seemed happier than me when I seemed to have everything that I thought I wanted, which was, the college baseball experience. And that wasn't just Father Mike, that was everybody at the Newman Center. They just seemed happier and more joyful. And I think I was attracted to that. And through that relationship, going into my senior year, Father Mike invited me to a daily mass at the Newman Center. And before that, said that he was going to be having confessions. And I really liked Father Mike. So I was like, of course I'll say yes, even though I haven't been to confession in, I don't know, 7-8 years at that point. And I walked in, and I don't think I prepared or anything like that. I just knew that I definitely was a sinner. And I remember just going in, and he helped me through all of that. And it was a really powerful experience. I don't know how much I changed externally through that first confession in terms of how I was living my life. I don't know if I changed anything, but it definitely convicted me inwardly of the things that I had done and the things that I was doing, to where I started feeling like I needed it often. And so from that point, once we got back on campus and things were a little bit more consistent, I just felt really called to go to confession every Sunday. And there were Sundays that I wouldn't go to mass because I didn't know that that was as important as confession. And so I was going to confession really consistently. And again, my formation wasn't great per se, or I just didn't know enough, but everyone was super patient with me, and God was patient with me and just kept calling me to confession, which eventually led to me saying yes to going on a retreat during the fall break, where I was really just met with the reality of the two lives that I was kind of living, which was this Bible study leader and seeing like this side of me changing, or like desiring change, and then the other side of me, which really just wanted to live like, again, that college athlete lifestyle with like partying and the honor and the glory and all those things. And so I was met with that, and it was during a night of adoration that I just remember God really calling me to trust him and to like give myself over to him and what he has in store for me. And so from there, it was one of those things where I returned from the retreat just knowing that I couldn't be the same person anymore, despite everything kind of going back to as it was before, but I had to be different than I was when I arrived. So that was the major shift, or I guess you could say conversion in my life that changed everything in my life.
That is so powerful. Audience, it's almost like I want to encourage you to press pause and kind of do some Lectio Divina with all that and just sit in that for a while, because think about the first half of our conversation, and Brett spent so much time talking about baseball and how devoted he was to it, how supportive his father was of it, and changing around to all these schools and then wondering what's happening with my baseball career. Am I going to play somewhere? Am I going to land on a roster? Am I going to be left behind? And it was so much about baseball. And yes, he was Catholic, but you never heard him really saying how devoted he was to his Catholic faith. He was so devoted to his baseball. And now to hear everything that he just gave is just such powerful testimony. And my gosh, what beautiful witness that he has shared with us. I wonder, Brett, as a pro baseball player and or with the training that you do of youth baseball players, as I mentioned in the intro, at a local facility, do you in fact mix your faith life with your sports life? And if so, how?
It's a good question. I would answer that I try. I try really hard. And that's been like the journey, is to try to figure out, okay, how does this game that's just something that kids do for fun that I somehow get paid to do, how do I glorify God in that? And that's been a challenge at times, because I think we're all in some sense, especially as athletes, performing, and you go to war against honor and glory and all those things that are super attractive about the athlete lifestyle, and then trying to defer that and give it to God. And so that's one of the ways that I'm actively trying to bring together faith and sport.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But there are other ways too, in that it's always incredible to me. And as our season is getting kicked off here, it surprises me every year how many guys are super interested in their faith, who are searching for something bigger, who have deep questions of the heart and are searching for truth and are open to conversations, and just being somebody who is available to have those conversations, or who maybe they recognize is also searching for answers.
I like it.
It's like a huge, it's a gift, and that's part of sharing the good news, and it's part of sharing an experience of faith, and just getting to know God through sport. But most it really is just getting to know God through like people and the interactions. And I've been grateful that I have traveled as much as I have and seen as many people as I have, to kind of know that there's a lot of people who are looking for truth, and there's a lot of like seeds that are out there.
Something about what you're saying is making me think of the contemporary Christian song, He Ain't Finished With Me Yet. I think it might be Brandon Heath. I might be saying the wrong artist, but I like, audience, that Brett is recognizing that he ain't finished with me yet, and that Brett is still growing into his Catholic faith. And so, yes, he's making these efforts, but he's also leaving room to say, I'm not ready to be Father Mike Schmitz to all these people that I encounter. I'm going to continue to grow, and I'll make some efforts, but seeds are still being sown. For those who are not familiar with the Frontier League, tell us about the Schaumburg Boomers and your season actually just now starting, despite MLB having had opening day back at the end of March.
Yeah, so our team is part of now an expanding league called the Frontier League, which I think almost has like 14 or 15 teams in it now that span mostly from the Midwest, a little bit south, and all the way up to Quebec, Canada. So
wow,
the league is pretty expansive, and it's a league built up of a lot of interesting players from a lot of interesting backgrounds, which is pretty common in professional baseball on the whole. But we get a lot of guys who maybe had a chance in affiliated baseball where they were with, let's say, like the White Sox or the Cubs for a little while, and were released by them. And so now this is sort of an opportunity for them to try to get back there. We get a lot of guys who maybe had really good collegiate seasons and just haven't really gotten that opportunity. And so this is somewhere that they can start. And then there's a lot of guys sort of like myself who have just been around for a little while and are just trying to empty the tank of what they got left in baseball and give it over.
So 25 words or less, and then I'll ask my final question so we could wrap up. But 25 words or less, do you now, Brett, seeing where you are in your faith journey, look back at the fact that, audience, noticeable by its absence is the fact that we have never said throughout this whole interview anything about Brett being drafted, right, into MLB. So, Brett, knowing where you are now in your faith journey, do you look back at that? Because I'm sure there had to be times in your baseball career, right, where you looked back and said, hey, I was good enough. I should have been drafted by somebody. Do you look back now through a faith lens and see God's hand in the journey that you have had as opposed to if you had gotten drafted?
In 25 words or less, I'll steal what a friend of mine said a long time ago, Harrison Smith. He just said, I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And maybe those words didn't always land, but I think they're starting to ring true now as I get closer to the end of my career. I think God's led me exactly where I'm supposed to be, and he's used every ounce of it to try to draw as many people close to himself and draw me closer as well.
Yeah, look at the story that he's given you to tell, as we've heard throughout this episode. So clearly you're right where he has wanted you to be. So let's close by having you share about what parish you belong to, as well as some involvement that I know that you have had there, other than just being a parishioner.
Yeah, I am a parishioner at St. Mary's in Huntley, Illinois, and our family moved out there right around COVID time, so I wasn't able to get super involved, but I tried, and throughout just like the past couple of years building better relationships, I did some work with their youth ministry, and then eventually when they needed some coverage, I was able to kind of take over the middle school youth ministry. So I did that as an off-season job last year, and was really an awesome job where I got to just interact with a lot of kids and talk about faith.
Wonderful, wonderful. Brett, thank you so much for making time to be on Catholic Sports Radio. God bless you, and we'll all be praying for you for this new baseball season that you're starting.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And audience, it's fitting, obviously, that we close this week's episode with an athlete's prayer. So let's pray that together right now in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I thank you, O God, for giving me a body which is fit and strong, and for making me able to use it well. In my training, help me never to shrink the discipline which I know that I need and that I ought to accept. In my leisure and in my pleasure, help me never to allow myself any indulgence which would make me less fit than I ought to be. When I compete with others, help me, win or lose, to play fair. When I win, keep me from boasting. When I lose, keep me from making excuses. Keep me from being conceited when I succeed, and from being sulky when I fail. And help me always with good will congratulate a better man who beat me. Help me so to live that I will always have a healthy body and a healthy mind. This I ask for your love's sake. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks so much for listening. This is Catholic Sports Radio. Find more at catholicsportsradio.net, as well as on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It is at Cath Sports Radio on all those, C-A-T-H, at Cath Sports Radio. I'm Bruce Wozniak, and remember, it's not whether you win or lose, it's that it's Jesus that you always choose.